So began the Farbrengen this afternoon that today's Shabbos combines within itself several inyanim, which actually each one of them is an inyan in itself. And now we have them all combined. So when we have them all combined, it means that one is really assisting the other. The inyanim in today's Shabbos, first of all, it is Shabbos. Secondly, it's a Shabbos of Tes Vov Lachodesh, the 15th in the month. And as the expression goes, Kaima Sihara Bashli Musa, this is a day when the moon is in its completeness, as we will get to later in the Farbrengen. And most particular, that this is the Shabbos which comes after Yud Shvat. Yud Shvat is the Hilula Yahrzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And here the Rebbe right away explained that Bichlal, Shabbos, has a very obvious shaykhs to a Talmud Chacham in general. Because the Gemara tells us that a Talmud Chacham is called Shabbos. Talmud Chacham Ikre Shabbos, the Gemara says. How much more so is it when we're talking not only about an ordinary Talmud Chacham, but when we are talking about someone who is a Nasi B'Yisrael. And the Rebbe says that there's a halacha. The halacha tells us that a Nasi is forbidden to do certain types of melaches in public. Memela, here we are talking about a Nasi, so a Nasi has a very obvious shaykhs to Shabbos. And this is the Shabbos, which comes after Yud Shvat. And Shabbos is Bechlal a chosen day. This is the day of Chemdas Yomim Oisei Karasa. This is the chosen day, the most lovable of all the days. And this Shabbos comes after Yud Shvat. I don't recall if it was here or elsewhere in the Farbrengen when the Rebbe was talking about the greatness of the Yom HaShabbos. Rebbe said that by every day of the week in the creation, the pasuk tells us Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Voiker. It was evening and it was day. By Shabbos, the Torah does not use the expression of Vayhi Erev. What does this mean? As far as we're concerned, that Shabbos, the entire Shabbos, is a day of light, is a day of spiritual light. Getting back to the inyan of this Shabbos coming, this being the Shabbos of after Yud Shvat, and particularly when we're talking about a Nasi, and a Nasi in Chasidus Chabad. And we know how Chasidus Chabad demands from each and every Chassid. There's a famous expression going back original yet to amongst the Talmidei HaMagid and Talmidei HaBaal Shem. There was an expression of Tzadik be'emenoso yichye, there's a pasuk. So other Hasidim interpreted it V'tzadik be'emunosoi yechaye, meaning that just to have emunah in a tzaddik, then the tzaddik helps us. The fact that we are associated with a tzaddik by having emunah in a tzaddik, this is yechaye, this brings life into us. Chabad claims that this is not sufficient. It's not enough having emunah in a tzaddik and us sitting back and not doing anything. We also have to be heavily involved in an avodah. And on the contrary, this is what Chabad demands from us, that we should be constantly involved in various spiritual tasks which we are given. So, when we're talking about a Shabbos, which is coming after the Yahrzeit of a Nasi, and such a Nasi of Chasidei Chabad, we can imagine what this Shabbos demands from us. And here the Rebbe right away quoted the Igeres HaKodesh. The Alter Rebbe in the Igeres HaKodesh tells us how important Maaseh is, action. The Alter Rebbe explains that Kavanah, intent, is a very good thing. And Kavanah is very, very, very important at times. However, if one will have all the Kavanah in the world, and he will not fulfill the Maaseh, the actual deed of doing the mitzvah, then he did not do the mitzvah. So from here we see the importance of Maaseh. Memela, when we're talking about the Shabbos after Yud Shvat, and we know what the Frierdiker Rebbe gave his life for. Frierdiker Rebbe's life was for the Inyan of Afotas Hamayonos and for Afotas Hayadus. This is what he gave his life for. Memela, to us today, this comes as a reminder how we have to be involved in the Aveda of being Mekarav Yidin to Yiddishkeit, to be Mekarav Yidin to Chassidus. Hafatzas Hamayonos Chutza, reaching out to a Chutza, to an area which is called Chutza. Just like there's the famous taich from the Tzemach Tzedek, and the pasuk Yosef Hashem li bein acher. That Torah tells us this when Yosef was born. Pasuk uses this expression. So the Tzemach Tzedek teaches that the goal of a Yid is to take one who is an acher, he's an outsider, and see to it that he is uplifted to a level of Yosef Hashem li bein. He's considered a bein, a son to the Rebishter. Until now, he was an acher. And what do we have to do? Reach to this acher and see to it that he should no longer be an acher, but become a bein la'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, be worthwhile, worthy of the title of being a child to the Rebishter. And all of this, the Rebbe continues, has to be done in a way of zeh. We read in this week in the Seder, zeh keli v'anveyu in the Shira. So, Rashi comments, mare be'etzboi v'oimer zeh, that the Yidden were pointing with their fingers, that this is the Rabbeinu Shalom. The same thing when we're talking about the Aveda of being Mekarav another Yid. It's not just sufficient that we have these things in theory and we have these things in intent and we want to do it and we plan doing it. But everything has to be brought down into mindset. It has to be done to such an extent that we should be able to point Zeh, Mare be'etzba v'oimer Zeh, to be able to pinpoint on the finger and everyone should be able to point that this is the Yid that he has been Mekarav. This is the accomplishment that he has achieved to bring another Yid and another Yid closer to Yiddishkeit, another Yid closer to Chassidus. This is what this Shabbos reminds us and demands from us, coming on the Shabbos after Yud Shvat, how heavily involved we have to be, not with, the Rebbe says, not giving excuses, and a maslois. A masla in Hebrew means an excuse. So the Rebbe always teaches, Hamasla taka means an excuse, but it's composed of two words. Emes loy. It's not the truth. It's an excuse. But still, we are lacking the accomplishment. We haven't accomplished anything. We have excuses. And from excuses, again, this will not amount to anything. Everything has to be done in a way that we should be able to be mare be'etzba again, to be able to point zeh. These are the products which we were successful being mekarav to Yiddishkeit and being mekarav to Chassidus, and by this we are fulfilling the wish of the Bala Hilula of the Frierdiker Rebbe.
What's the word? Hilula.
Hilula means a yortzeit. Then the Rebbe continued that this Shabbos, being that it is Shabbos and it is Tesvav, really combines two outstanding inyan. Shabbos is the highest day of the week. So we just spoke before, Chemdas Yom Moisei Karasa. That's Mitzad Cheshbon of the sun, as the Seder of the week is. Then comes in the Maila of the Lavana, which this is the inyan of Kaimes Sihara Bashlimusa, that today the Lavana, the moon, is in its completeness. It is Tesva, 15 days in the month. Which this the Rebbe says is, in a way, is already a reminder of what it will be like La'asid Lavi when Mashiach will come. But when Mashiach will come, then the Goyim will be in a total bittul to Yidden, and Yidden will be overruling the Goyim. And just like now, we know it's Yisrael, Meinin, L'Lavana. The Yidden, the Yiddish calendar is set up on the Lavana. And the Ummah Ha'olam Amoinin Lachama, and the Goyish is set up on the sun. Here we have on this Shabbos we have a combination of both of these inyanim. So it's like combining the way Yidden work and the way the Goyim work. So this, when will this really be united? This will be united when Mashiach will come. So now already today, on this day of today, we already have a taste of what it will be like when Mashiach will come. And here the Rebbe raised the question. We say that the Rebbe set up the moon. And what system? That for the first 15 days, it keeps on increasing. Then it comes the latter part of the month, then the Levana decreases, the moon keeps on getting smaller. Well, the Rebbe says, we know that there is a klal, Mailim b'kodesh. In any union of Kedusha, we constantly have to keep on growing and growing, going higher and higher. So how could we say that the Rebbe created something, and something which is functioning in this world, which is not in agreement to this rule of Mailim b'kodesh? On the contrary, and this happens every single month. Every single month comes the second part of the month, the Levana gets smaller. How can this be? So the Rebbe explained, we must say that there is a plus in the fact also that the Levana keeps on decreasing on the second half of the month. And what is this? Here it reflects the concept of a nafshi ka'ofer la koil tiyeh. Which we say in davening, my soul is like dust to all. What does this mean? The concept of anova, the concept of bittul, of modesty. Memela, the Indian of miut hayoreach, how the Levana keeps on getting smaller the second half of every month. This also shows us an Indian in Avodas Hashem. Just like the first half of the month, we see how the Levana keeps on being increased. This reflects the Indian of Mailim b'kodesh. The same when we are talking in the second half of the month, how we see the Levana is getting smaller. Not chas v'sholem, it's an Indian which is contrary to the idea of Mailim b'kodesh. This is another Indian in itself. This is an Indian of derech ha'avoda of a nafshi ka'ofer la koil tiyeh, the avoda of bittul, which is also a very significant derech in Avodas Hashem.
What do you say the nafshi?
Shmona Esrei. And here the Rebbe continued how this afternoon we began reading in the Torah Parshas Yisro. And Parshas Yisro is the Sedra of Kabbalah HaTorah. Prior to Kabbalah HaTorah came the Inyan of the man. In other words, the Yidden had the man, which was a lechem min hashamayim, which was heavenly type of food, which the Rebbe provided them with before he gave them the Torah. It was a lechem she'ein by psoilas, a lechem which has a food which has no waste, no psoilas like ordinary food which we eat. And this is the type of food which the Rebbe gave the Yidden, was serving them prior to Matan Torah and all the years that the Yidden were in the Midbar. Rebbe said, being that Mara tells us, Ma'ala halon, be'emil be'yira be'reses u'beziyah. Just like when the Yidden received the Torah. They received the Torah and they were God-fearing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because they were addressed directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there was an aim of yira, there was a fear prevailing amongst the Yidden. Same the Rebbe says, the Gemara says, Afkan, now when we learn Torah, it also has to be in a way of Eima and Yira, Vereses Viziyah. We also have to learn Torah just like as if we have received it right now from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Memela, this introduction which came to the Yidden then, the Indian of the man, is negated to us now as well. What does this mean? It means that the Gashmias of a Yid has to be in a way of Lechem min hashamayim. In other words, a Yid is taki involved in Gashmias, and we all have a shaychus to Gashmias, and this is how our daily lives are set up. However, we have to know that a Yid's Gashmias is heavenly bread. What is the pshat? A Yid has to know that in his Gashmias he has to remember the Rebbeinu and constantly has to be reflected the inyan of the Rabbeinu Shalom in all of his Gashmias. And here the Rebbe continued. The halacha is mefakhin al tzorchei tzibur b'Shabbos. Comes Shabbos, we are allowed to be in charge and take care of inyanim which are for the benefit of the public. The Rebbe says, obviously, we are talking about such type of inyanim which we're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Otherwise, there's no need to introduce this halacha of mefakchen al tzorchi tzibur b'Shabbos. In other words, we are going to, being that these are communal needs, these are needs of the public, so we're allowed to see to it that this will be taken care of. On Shabbos, we are worrying and seeing to it that these things, these inyanim will be fully adhered to. I have spoken in the spiritual sense. Shabbos is al yetze yishmim kaima b'yem Shabbos. It's a pasuk in this week's Seder. In other words, Shabbos, nobody leaves his place. Spiritually, meaning Shabbos, everybody's living in his high spiritual level. However, we are told on Shabbos that we have to be mifakeach, we have to be in charge of tzorchei tzibur, of the needs of the public. What does tzibur abbreviate? Rebbe says tzibur abbreviates. Tzibur is spelled tzadik, beis, vav, reish. Tzadikim, beinanim, and the vav, reish, urishoyim. What is our whole inyan? We have to unite all of these three segments into one. Tzadikim, beinanim, and here comes the vav. A vav is a vav ha-mechaber. In Hebrew, a vav attaches. What? In other words, the tzadikim and the beinanim are becoming attached with the third segment of Yid. Rebbe said, so there are those of us who are sitting by the Farbrengens and are listening to what he's talking about the Farbrengen, and with all the purest and finest intention. However, it comes after the Farbrengen. What do many do? Use the expression in Yiddish. They go out and mitzählt the Fliegen. You count the flies. It's an expression. In other words, it's an expression of doing nothing. The Rebbe says, on one hand, yeah, sure. Why does he count the flies? Because the flies are interfering with him. In his Gashmiistika surroundings, and in his Gashmiistika worlds, when their flies, the insects are there, they are interfering with whatever he's trying to do. Therefore, what does he do? He gets involved in counting the Fliegen, zählen the Fliegen. But naturally, this is no derech, this is not the derech in Avodas Hashem. Our inyan is, and here again, he referred to what he spoke about in the first Sicha, our inyan is to be mefakeach al tzorchei tzibur. This can be done even in Shabbos. We have to go out to be in charge of, to see to it that the needs are covered, to see that all the needs of the public are covered. And Memela, wherever we know that we can still reach out to a Yid and be a Mekarev, whether it's a question of bringing him close to Yiddishkeit, or it's a question of bringing him close to Chassidus, taking the Mayon of Chassidus, the well of Chassidus, spring of Chassidus, and reaching out with the Mayon to the Chutzah, to the furthest point of Chutzah. This is what it is our obligation to do. Later in the Farbrengen, Rebbe mentioned, in connection with Yud Shvat, there's another inyan which is going to be coming up, which we would like to talk about in due time. And that is the inyan of Siyum HaRambam. We are about, the Rebbe says, to have the second Siyum on the Rambam already. It would, for those who are learning 3 Prakim of Rambam a day, the Siyum will come out Chavav Adar Rishon, 26 days in the next month, in the month of Adar. The Rebbe says he's talking about it now, so that proper planning will be made, and it should be double than what it was last year, and not only double what it was last year, even those who began making plans already how to make this year's Siyum HaRambam, so the Siyum HaRambam should be double of what their intention was. And especially based on the pasuk Roiv Am Hadras Melech, that with a large participation, it is a beauty for the Melech. And here we are talking about the Rambam. And the Rambam, most of the commentaries on the Rambam have the name Melech in their title. Mishnah LaMelech, other types of other Mefarshim, all with the name of Melech. Therefore, it's most appropriate here to apply this idea of Beroivam Hadras Melech, to see to it that should be properly attended and properly prepared. The Rebbe said, being that it comes out to be on a Friday, Chavav Adar Rishon, so the most suitable day to make the siyum would be either on the Shabbos, which is the day after. The Rebbe says a siyum is usually made after we have completed. It is not common to make a siyum, even we are about to complete the Rambam, to make it, let's say, a few days before the siyum. It's not practiced to make a siyum before we finish the sefer. However, once we have already finished the sefer, it doesn't matter if it's made on that day, the next day, or even a short while later, as long as it is within a close time to when we have completed the Rambam. The Rebbe asked that those that made siyumim of the Rambam in the past, last year in other words, and they were involved in it, should also be involved this year, and see to it that everything should be done in a proper way. Another appropriate date the Rebbe says to make the siyum Rambam would be on Rosh Chodesh, especially that this is the siyum is right before Shabbos Mevorchim Adar Sheni, and the month of Adar we read Megillah, and the Megillah is the pasuk La Yehudim Haisa Oira V'Simcha V'Sasan V'Yakar. And Chazal interpret what does Oira mean? What means by Yid light, spiritual light? Oira Zu Toira, the Gemara says. Memela, appropriate dates and suitable dates should be selected to make the siyum of the Rambam. The Rebbe also suggested Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni should be suitable dates. But again, the Rebbe says Ein Lo L'Dayan Ela Lamasha Ein Avroyes. A judge sees, a dayan sees on the spot in front of him what to decide on. Therefore, the Rebbe says in all the respective areas, and all the countries and all the cities, wherever a siyum Rambam will be made, the best advice is that the people on the spot, the Rabbanim on the spot, and the committee on the spot, they should be the ones to decide when the siyum Rambam should be taking place. Rabbi also mentioned that being that there are people here at the Farbrengen from Eretz Yisrael, such people who will not be here closer to the siyum Rambam, especially amongst those people are Rabbanim. The Rebbe gave mashke from today's Farbrengen to them that they should take it along with them to Eretz Yisrael and use it as a participation in the siyumei Harambam, which will be made in Eretz Yisrael. Regarding today's shiur in the Rambam, where we are learning Hilchas Malva V'Loive, first of all, the Rebbe raised a very strong question in the beginning of the Rambam in Hilchas Malva V'Loive. The Rambam tells us, mitzvah sasei, it is a mitzvah sasei, positive mitzvah, lahalvois la'aniya Yisrael, to give a gemilas chesed, to lend money to a yid who is poor. Shenema, the Rambam quotes a pasuk, im kesef talves ami esa oni imach. Rebbe says this Rambam is totally not understood for a very simple reason. The Gemara tells us that the mitzvah of gemilas chasadim applies bein la'aniyim and bein la'ashirim. It is not any bigger mitzvah to give a loan to a poor person than it is to a rich person who at this time is in need of a halvah. In fact, the Gemara uses the expression Ashir sheba'oisa shah anihu. At this time, when he's in need of a loan, he is poor, meaning that he needs of he's in need of a loan. Could be he has a lot of money, but his money is tied up; it's not liquid at this moment. Therefore, he's in need of some cash money. So there's a mitzvah to lend him money. So the Rambam says, mitzvahs esa lahalvais to whom la'aniya Yisrael. At least the Rambam should explain. The Rambam is quoting the pasuk of Im Kesef Talves Ami Esa Ani Imach. So at least the Rambam should explain what Chazal tell us, that even an Ashir goes into the category of an Ani at this time. Ani ba'isa shaf, at this moment he's temporarily considered an Ani because he's in need of a gemilas chesed. Interesting, the Rebbe says, in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, it is called the sixth chelik, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and Choshen Mishpat. The Alter Rebbe there quotes the same expression from the Rambam. The Rebbe also uses the expression mitzvah esa lahalvois la'aniya Yisrael. Incidentally, the Rebbe said he doesn't know why it is referred to as the sixth chelik. Usually we know in Shulchan Aruch there are 4 chalakim, Orach Chaim, Choshen Mishpat, Yeredeya, and Even Ezer. However, it seems that the Bnei HaMechaber, the children of the Alter Rebbe who wrote the preface, wrote a Hakdama to the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, refer to this chelik, the last chelik of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, as the sixth chelik of the Shulchan Aruch. Anyways, this is one in. Another inyan, in today's, more specific, in today's Shir of the Rambam. In today's Shir of the Rambam, and that is in Perik Yud Aleph, Halacha Vav, the Halacha of Ein Odom Pereya Choyvoi Toich Zmanoi is discussed. What does this mean? It means, if Ruvain took a loan from Shimon, and he made up to pay him this loan, let's say, in 60 days. Then Shimon comes back to Ruvain and tells him and asks for his money. He didn't get paid yet. So Ruvain says, I paid you. When did I ask him, when did you pay me? I paid you after 45 days. So the halacha is, in such a case we do not believe Ruvain, the one who took the loan. Why? There's a svara. Ein Adam Pereya Choyvoi Toich Zmanoi. If you have arranged a loan, and you made up that you will pay this loan after 60 days, the nature of people is not to go ahead and pay the loan before the time. Memela, if this person says that he did pay the loan before the time, we do not believe. Where does this halacha originate from? It originates from a Gemara in Masechta Bava Basra. In the beginning of Masechta Bava Basra, we have a machloikes of Rish Lakish and Abaye v'Rava. Masechta Bava Basra and Daf Hey. Omer Rish Lakish says, HaKoivei azman lechaveiroi, when a loan was taken and a time was set when to pay it. V'Omer loy, and the one who took the loan, the loive, said, Praticha b'toich zmani, I paid you before the time. Rish Lakish claims, Eino nem, and we do not believe him. And he adds on, Ulavai sheyifra bizmanai, halavai, people should pay on time. Here he says he paid before the time. Abaye and Rava together have a different approach. The Amra Tarvayu, both of them say different. Avad inish the para begoiz mane. It could happen that a person should pay before the time also. Why? Zimnin de misramele zuzah. At times he may have money. He has money. He has access to money. Amma, he will say, Ezel ifrei, I will go and pay them. Keheiche de leili tardon, so that it shouldn't bother them. In other words, being that he has the money, he wants to pay them. So the Rebbe asks, we have a klal in Gemara and Halacha, that whenever there's a machloikis between Tanoim or amongst Amoraim, and there's an opinion of an Amoira or a Tana who lived in previous generations, an earlier generation, and he is arguing with an Amoira or a Tana who lived in a later generation, the halacha is that we accept the opinion of the one who lived in a later generation. It's explained in Sfarim. Why? Because the one who lived later was well aware of the opinion of the first one, of his colleague, of the one who was not agreeing with him, and still he goes ahead and says different. So obviously he checked it out, and that is why he came up with a different opinion. So the Rebbe is asking if here we have the machlokes between Rish Lakish and Abaye v'Rava. Abaye v'Rava lived after Rish Lakish. Abaye v'Rava claimed that we could believe a person when he says that he paid a debt before it was due. The halach should have been like Abaye v'Rava and not like Rish Lakish. And besides, Rabbi says there is also a logic, it's brought in Svara and not a Svara. There's a logic to a Svara that a person has to pay his debt, so he's going to pay it with money, with metaltala. And if he has the money before the day that it is due, at times he may be afraid to hold on to the money. He may spend it, or he may be afraid it will be stolen. So for all of these reasons, he goes ahead and pays the chayiv before it is due. Still, we see that the halacha did not accept this opinion. The halacha accepted the opinion that ein odam pereya choyve toich zman. If we look into the meforshim on this sugya, and in Poiskim, the case of Pidyon Haben is brought in here. Pidyon Haben, meaning that a father is obligated to redeem his 30-day-old baby if the child is born from parents Yisraelim. In other words, if the father or mother are not a Kohen or a Kehenes, a daughter of a Kohen, a Levi or a daughter of a Levi, then we know we have a din of Pidyon Haben. So the Paiskim, the Mefoshim here, in fact, Tosfos, compare the halacha of Pidyon Haben to this case. In other words, how about if a question arises about being paida, a baby, redeeming a baby before the 30th day? This is considered like Teich Zmaneh, because there's no obligation to be paida the baby until the baby is 30 days old. So, is that a child is redeemed through his father after 30 days. Prior to that, not. So here the Rebbe comes in, the Rebbe's derech, and asked the following. Gemara tells us, in the end of Masechta Pesachim, the idea of Pidyon Haben is discussed, and there the Gemara tells us that the father is the one who has to make a bracha, makes a bracha of a Shechiyonu, makes a bracha on the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben. So here all the Mefarshim compare this, that the Rabbeinu Shalom, who is our father, and Yidden are considered his firstborn children because of B'ni B'chayri Yisrael, the Rabbeinu Shalom has to redeem his children as well, has to be paid to his child. The Rebbe says, Magi devarav leYaakov chukav v'mishpatav leYisrael, the Pasuk says, which means whatever the Rabbeinu Shalom tells us to do, he himself listens to as well. So the question here arises, we are demanding from the Rabbeinu Shalom. The Rabbeinu Shalom should take us out of Galus, and we keep on screaming and pleading with him that he should make an end to the Galus. Why? Just like the father is not paid to the child until it came the 30th day, the same thing, the Rabbeinu Shalom has set a time when he will take us out of Galus, which means when Yidden will be worthwhile to go out of Galus, and that is when the Rabbeinu Shalom will take us out of Galus. Why are we complaining to him? Just like in other words, the same approach of nobody pays up a debt before it is due. And just like the father does not redeem his child before the infant is 30 days old, it's the same the Rabbeinu Shalom to us. Rebbe says there's a big difference. Difference is a very obvious one. Why doesn't a father redeem his child, the infant, before 30 days? There's a reason given for this in halacha. Because al pi halacha, once a baby is 30 days, he's yotza miklal nefel. Then we hope that the baby will survive. As long as an infant is not 30 days old, we are still in doubt if the infant will survive. By Yidden, there's no such chash. This doubt falls away. So therefore, it is definitely the time that the Rabbeinu Shalom should take the Yidden out of Galus. And there is no excuses for it. And the Rebbe began talking here very, very loudly and was holding himself back from crying, that it's the highest point already that the Rabbeinu Shalom should take us all out of Galus. The Rebbe uses the expression, Daloi Galus, it's a Russian expression, enough with Galus. The Rebbe says there are those of us who are sitting here and are thinking, the Rabbeinu Shalom is going to take us out of Galus, and it's Shabbos. So we're going out of Galus, we're going to be leaving our premises, and we have a handkerchief on us. And the Gemara says, Tzadikim, Mamainam Chaviv Aleim Yisam Agufam. To Tzadikim, their money is very dear to them. So he's making a cheshbon, he has a fatshela. A fatshela in Yiddish means a handkerchief. Rebbe expressed himself, a roite fatshela, a red handkerchief. A red handkerchief on him. So he's thinking, how are we demanding that the Rabbeinu Shalom should take us out of Galus? He's going to have a problem. He can't take along with him his handkerchief. And the handkerchief may be worth not only a pruta, but 2 prutas. Rebbe says, Yidden have long given themselves an eitzah with that. And if it's a question of walking out with a handkerchief on Shabbos, we see how Yidden have adopted a custom that a handkerchief is we tie it around our necks, and that is how we carry it and we walk out on Shabbos with it, as long as the Rabbeinu Shalom should take us out of Galus already. Yidden don't want to stay in Galus. The Rabbeinu Shalom himself is in Galus, and he also doesn't want to be in Galus any longer. Shchinta b'Galus, the Rebbe is in Galus together with the Yidden. The Rebbe elaborated on this and spoke about it a good few minutes, how it is already the highest point that the Rabbeinu Shalom should take us out of Galus. We have been in Galus more than enough. and we have suffered so much, and it's time that the Rebbe should take us out, put an end to the Golus. There were many, many expressions here. I don't recall them, all of them at the moment, but all the expression how it's we've been enough in Golus and enough suffered, and it is our obligation to demand from the Rabbeinu Shalom. He says there's nothing wrong with demanding from the Rabbeinu Shalom, and this could be demanded from the Rabbeinu Shalom at all times, even on Shabbos. On Shabbos we're prohibited to ask for our individual needs, for our personal needs, but the fact to ask the Rabbeinu Shalom that he should take us out of Golus, this is something which we're allowed to do at all times, and beg of him and demand of him that he should put an end to the Golus. And not like those that claim that they have their positions here and they are settled here. Mamela, how can we ask that the Rabbeinu Shalom should come and make an end to all of this, and we should go out into Golus? It's going to be interfering with our daily lives. Chas v'sholom, it's not so. And it's time we should go, and we will all go with our Imanona Shemaya on the clouds, which will be taking all of us out of Golus into Eretz Yisrael. Getting back to the Rambam, why the Rambam uses the expression mitzvahs eser lahalvois. It's a mitzvah to give a loan to whom? To the poor, la'aniyah Yisrael. Rabbi answered this in a bederach efshar. He says perhaps it could be answered that the Rambam tells us that mitzvahs are given to build up the moral of people and purify us spiritually, and this is the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us all the mitzvahs. And the Rambam elaborates on this in several places in his Sefer HaRambam. Anyways, being that this is the goal of all mitzvahs, now if a person would see that he has an opportunity to give a loan to two types of people. There's a real poor person who nebuch doesn't have anything, and he's in need of a loan. Then there's another person who is an ashir. He's a wealthy person. However, he does not have any liquid money at the moment. What we call an ani ba'isa shah. At this time he's poor. So what would people say? People would say, it is more rachmanis, it is more pity to go out and help the person who doesn't have anything. Now, but he's a poor man. This person who just doesn't have liquid money at the moment, he'll, as the expression goes in Yiddish, he'll give zechanetza. He'll work his way around. He has money tied up. He has assets. He has ways to do things. However, the one who's completely poor, him it's a mitzvah to help. So that is why the Rambam did not want to get involved in explaining that there are two types of categories of aniyim, two different types of people who are in need of alvois. There's a regular ani, there's one who is considered an ani or a man, and there's the one who is considered an ashir. However, he's an ani ba'isa shah. At this moment, he's poor. So the Rambam felt that if you will get involved in explaining that there are various categories of poor people who are in need of loans, this will affect that the one who is giving the loan will start evaluating which recipient is more chashiv to get the loan and which one could wait or whatever. So the Rambam stood away from all this. And the Rambam included them all into Aniyah Yisrael. Because really, the one who is an Ashir, as we just keep on mentioning, is what the Gemara says on the pasuk as the Ani Imach, that even the Ashir is also an Ani Ba'isa Shah. At this time when he's in need of a loan, he's considered poor because he needs help, he needs assistance, he needs a loan. So that is why the Rambam puts it in a very general term. Mitzvahs eseh lahalvais la'aniyah Yisrael. It is the mitzvahs say to give a loan, to give a gemilas chesed to Aniyah Yisrael. Who does the Rambam mean by Aniyah Yisrael? He means everybody. He doesn't mean dafka the poor person who doesn't have anything. He means the poor person taka who doesn't have anything as well. Together with him, the one who is a wealthy person, who is an ashir. However, he does not have any liquid money at the moment. And Mamela, he's also in need of a gemilas chesed. Shenema im kesef talvesami esa oni imach. He will lend money. You go out and give a gemilas chesed. It's a mitzvah. It's a great mitzvah. So the Rambam says, this mitzvah applies to anyone who was considered an ani at that time. And the Rambam stays away from getting involved in different levels of poverty. Who's considered a Zaraman or a Zaraman? The Rambam includes it in a very general term, because the Rambam wants that we should give the same way, Gemilas Chesed, to everyone. If a Yid is in need of a Gemilas Chesed, we have to give him. Because if he's in need of the loan, he's considered an Oni at this time, regardless whether he has money or doesn't have money, or regardless, or we're talking about the one who's Takan Oni, who's all the way another man. So the Rambam includes it all in one and tells us, regarding, it's customary in the Farbrengen that the Rebbe learns a Rashi in this week's Sedre. That is in Pashas Beshalach, where the Torah talks about the man. The Rebbe raised the question. Torah tells us all the details about the man, and that is in Kapitel Tes Zayin. Pasuk Tes Zayin. Pasuk begins, Zeh hadava shatziva Hashem, this is what the Rebbe has demanded. Liktu mimenu ish lefi ochloi, ayma lagul goylas. How should the man be collected? Ish lefi ochloi. What does ish lefi ochloi mean? As much as one needs. As much as one needs to eat. Then the pasuk continues. Oimer. What does oimer mean? So Rashi right away comments, oimer shem midah. This is a type of name of a quantity. Just like there is a kezayis, and just like there is a other shiurim, there's a shiur of an oimer. Then the psukim continue. Vayasuchem b'nei Yisrael, and this is what the Yidden did. Vayilketu hamarbe v'hamamit. There were those that took more, there were those that took less. What happened was, a nes happened. What was the nes? That the one that took more, and the one that took less, when they came home, they all had the same. Because the Rebbe told us how much to take. The Rebbe said we should take an oimer. If we look into Rashi, on Pasuk Yud Zayin, Rashi says, hamarbe v'hamamit. Rashi explains what was going on here. There were those that took a lot, and there were those that took little. When they came home and they started weighing what they had, everyone wound up with an oimer lagul goylas. For every head in the family, there was an oimer. And Rashi concludes, V'zehu neis godel shenasaboy. Rashi says this was a very big miracle, not stam neis godel, which happened. Tremendous thing. Somebody took 2 oimers, for example. He comes home, he only has 1 oimer. Somebody took a half oimer. He comes home, he has a full oimer. It's a big neis. Somebody's raising a very simple question. There's a very obvious contradiction here in the pasuk, and Rashi should have definitely commented on it. And Rashi doesn't. Pasuk begins saying, Zeh hadava shatziva Hashem. What did the Rebbe say? Liktu mimenu. You shall collect the man. How? What type of way? Ish lefi ochloi. Ish lefi ochloi means whatever one needs. What does one need? The Rebbe says if you go into a family and there are children, and there are adults, there are younger children, there are older children, not everybody eats the same portion. There are those that eat more, and there are those that eat less. An adult needs more. A small child eats very little. So the Torah tells us, Ish lefi ochloi. Go ahead and collect the man in what type of way? In a type of way as much as everybody needs. In other words, the one that needs more, let him take more. The one that needs less, let him take less. That's how we would learn the pasuk. What is the word right next to it? Oimer. That there should be a shiur of an oimer which everyone should take. It's a very obvious contradiction. And what's about those people that don't need an oimer? If there are people whose routine diet is what they eat during the day, naturally this had to be sufficient for 3 meals that were eaten during the day. Those people that do not eat the shiur of an oimer, they don't need an oimer. So no, we are told that everybody wound up with an oimer. So then what does the pasuk mean by ish lefi ochloi? Ish lefi ochloi obviously means that everybody got whatever was needed for them to be sufficient for their 3 meals. The Rebbe raised this question, and after talking this Rashi, the Rebbe spoke the Rambam, and about the Siyumei HaRambam, which we spoke about before. Also interesting, when the Rebbe was talking how we are to demand for the coming of Mashiach, the Rebbe says, though we are talking, and he's saying that this has to be done on Shabbos as well. So on Shabbos we know, Ein Etzav Ba. On Shabbos we're not allowed to be sad. And if we're going to be demanding such things from the Rebbe, in other words, we're going to be expressing our non-satisfaction about things, so this may lead to atzvus, to sadness. The Rebbe says no. He has spoken about previously a few Farbrengens at length, how every one of us is supposed to be besimcha. So at all times we are really supposed to be in joy. So the demanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should send us Mashiach, also has to be metoich simcha. Everything has to be penetrated with simcha, whatever we do. Getting back here, when the Rebbe began answering the Rashi, the Rebbe referred us to the psukim that tell us how the man came down on Shabbos. Pasuk tells us, Vayhi bayem ashishi, in Pasuk Chav Beis of the same capital, Lok tu lechem mishnah. What happened was, they went out and they got double. Shnei ha'im alecha, 2 oimas for every person. When they saw this, Vayavayu kol nesiyei daveyagidu l'Moshe. Rabbi says it was after a few days collecting man, so the Yid knew already that with the man there's no chachmas. They knew that even if you take more, you also wind up only with 1 oimah. Here what happened was, everybody came home and had 2 oimahs. It was something very strange. So they didn't know what has happened all of a sudden. Abba threw in a word, he doesn't know if this day, in other words, this was probably after a few days that the man was going. He doesn't know if here there was still a marbe and a mamit. Why? Because the one who wanted to take more or less the first day or the second day realized that such things can't go on. He realized that as much as you take or as little you take, you wind up with the same aimah. So this came Friday, so it was a good few days after the Yidden were already receiving the man. Here all of a sudden everybody realizes that he have a double portion. And in all probability, all everybody took was only 1 portion, because here they wouldn't take more than an aimah already, because they saw that taking more doesn't help them, they don't wind up with more. So what happened? Vayagidu l'Moshe. They came right away and they pointed it out to Moshe. So Moshe introduced them to the idea of Shabbos. Honestly, when the Rebbe gave this answer, it seems like everybody's lacking something to understand how this whole inyan is answering the Rebbe's question. It seems like either it wasn't fully explained, or the Rebbe will explain it at a next Farbrengen or at the next occasion. Everybody is surprised. He led into this inyan and kind of did not conclude how this answers his question. The Rebbe has a usual expression which he uses. He used it here, he used it on the Rambam. Whenever he doesn't complete an inyan, he uses an expression of Tein lachacham vayechkam oid. You give to a smart person, you give him a little bit, you give a chacham, you give him a little bit, he will have, with his chachma, to be able to dwell into it deeper and deeper. Same here, we concluded on the inyan, Tein lachacham vayechkam oid, but obviously it is not, I spoke over with some other people, it is not understood how the Rebbe was trying to answer this Rashi. Probably come out clearer either in the Sichas and the Hanachas, which will be published, or at the next Farbrengen. A gute Woche.